I do want to look like Barbie.
Why would you want to look like Barbie?
Darva, are you ready for a honeymoon tonight?
Absolutely, ready to go.
Would you get mad if I killed you?
24 disturbing moments of reality TV, 7 levels. From contestants being forced to drink a donkey's bodily fluids to a helicopter crash that killed 10 people on set. The deeper we go into this iceberg, the more it becomes clear that behind the staged drama and over-the-top editing, reality TV hides a much darker side. Let's start at the tip of the iceberg. Level 1. Naked and Afraid, 2013 to present. Contestant E.J. Snyder's wasp sting caused genital swelling. Naked and Afraid is a survival reality show that's known for pushing the boundaries of what survival is. It's built its reputation on being one of the most genuine reality shows, throwing its contestants into harsh wilderness environments with little to no preparation. The series essentially focuses on realism by amplifying the vulnerability of total exposure to nature. Most people participating in the challenge are usually everyday people with only a little survivalist experience. Naturally, this is a recipe for an extreme disaster that manifested itself in one of the worst injuries on the show. E.J. Snyder is a military veteran who appeared on the show in Season 9. He was a repeated contestant and was pretty famous for being tough and firm in the face of most challenges thrown his way. However, despite the toughness, the lack of any protective gear resulted in him cutting his genitals with a jagged branch. The worst part is, the limited on-site medical support made his situation so much more painful than it was initially supposed to be. It wasn't a minor scrape to begin with, and the lack of immediate action gave his wound a massive chance to become infected. Doctors warned him that it might even lead to him losing his genitalia.
Worst case scenario is an infection, a loss of genitalia, and if he becomes septic, it could be fatal.
He was quite literally pushed to his limits by enduring intense pain while still competing in extreme heat. He received 8 stitches and was advised to stop his participation, but ultimately refused to back down. He framed it as some sort of power of resiliency and commitment to his gig, but ultimately his injury underscored how far contestants and networks were willing to go for their 15 minutes of fame. They were blurring the boundaries between daring fun and genuine harm. Level 2. The Ultimate Slip-and-Slide, 2021. Giardia outbreak causing explosive diarrhea among crew. The Ultimate Slip-and-Slide was a new show on NBC scheduled for release in 2021. However, the most unexpected reason ended in it getting scrapped from the network entirely. With just a week left on an 8-week shoot, production of the show came to a halt when one crew member caught a strange stomach bug. Just a few days later, the entire crew contracted the parasite and ended up falling so sick it was reported that they were scrambling toward the nearest porta potty to relieve themselves. The stomach bug they contracted was known as Giardia, an intestinal parasite that causes severe stomach cramps and diarrhea in those affected. What started as a tiny problem for one person ended up being a massive outbreak that affected 40 crew members. That was the nail in the coffin for the show. NBC cited production delays as the reason for the cancellation, but this level of illness on a working set felt more like a public health crisis than a small hiccup. When professionals were finally brought in to test the waters, they found that all water sources near the production site were clear. But it was the soil that held the parasite, ultimately causing such a grave butterfly effect. Sadly, even with the potentially large amounts of content filmed, there is absolutely no proof that the show actually existed. You can find 0 footage online, and despite being nearly complete, the project itself just poofed out of existence. A Reddit user later came out as one of the contestants on the show and claimed that it wasn't paid for and was already fairly unhygienic, irrespective of the parasite outbreak. And while they were not directly affected by Giardia, they did apparently find a small worm in their fruit cup. It's safe to say the set was not hygienic. And frankly, with all of the, intestinal expulsions, I'm not sure any of us would really want to see what the ultimate slip and slide eventually looked like. Big Brother, 2000 to present, flirting with a knife. Anyone who doesn't know Big Brother is quite literally living under a rock. The show has been a fixture of reality TV since 2000 and has given rise to basically most modern reality shows out there. The premise was groundbreaking for its time. It consisted of trapping strangers inside a house and broadcasting their every move for weeks at a time. And naturally, with a bunch of living, walking humans trapped in a space together, there was drama.
Luke has been removed from the house and will no longer be participating in the Big Brother game.
However, things boiled over when Season 2 delivered a moment that crossed a line into something far more disturbing. One of the contestants, Justin Seabick, was already known for volatile behavior in the house, but he took things too far when one late-night interaction with fellow housemate Krista Stiegel turned into one of the show's darkest moments. During a seemingly harmless scene in the kitchen, Justin pulled out a kitchen knife, held it up to Krista's throat, and asked, "Would you get mad if I killed you?" before quickly pulling it away. The two shared a kiss afterward, but the footage made it clear how threatening the situation had been. Production immediately stepped in, and Justin was brought to a psychologist. That also solidified his position as the problematic person in the house because of all his prior red flags, including inappropriate comments and aggression towards other members during games. The knife episode became the final strike, and Justin was expelled from the house soon after.
Would you get mad if I killed you?
Shot him out faster than a slip and slide. Ugh. It was also later revealed that Justin actually had an extensive history of violence and had been convicted of multiple small crimes, including assault and theft. Krista later filed a lawsuit against CBS, arguing that the network had failed to screen Justin properly before allowing him on the show. Which makes us wonder, if such a big show with such a massive financial backing can fail to screen its contestants properly, imagine how bad it is with smaller networks. America's Next Top Model, 2003 to 2018, controversial photo shoot. America's Next Top Model was one of the biggest reality shows in the 2000s. It was hosted and led by the famous model Tyra Banks and promised some of the most insanely creative challenges in the history of reality shows. It was marketed as a golden chance to international fame for aspiring models who had been trying to get into the industry for years. Amongst all the challenges, the show's themed photo shoots became its most defining feature. But some of those shoots are remembered less for creativity and more for how unsettling they were in hindsight. One of the most notorious moments came in Cycle 4 with the race swap photo shoot. You can tell by the name how bad of an idea this was. All of the contestants were assigned different ethnicities and styled with clothing, hair, and darker makeup to match. White models were darkened to play black women, and others were styled into ethnic caricatures.
Naima's gonna be an Icelandic Scandinavian. Tatiana, a biracial woman. Wow.
At the time, due to the lack of awareness and accountability, the episode aired without much pushback. It wasn't until recently that fans finally pointed out the obvious problem. The entire concept of the photo shoot looked like blackface on national TV. Even creative director Jay Manuel admitted his discomfort, and Tyra herself eventually called it a poor choice. Ironically, despite the distasteful idea being called out the first time, the theme returned in Cycle 13 with a biracial photo shoot.
Aaron, you're going to be Tibetan, like the Dalai Lama, and Egyptian!
This one was literally the exact copy of the previous one where models were made up to represent mixed ethnicities. Once again, contestants were altered with makeup and placed into cultural stereotypes. What was presented as a celebration of diversity instead came across as completely tone deaf. There were also times when the disturbing element came from the sheer insensitivity these people showed toward their contestants. In Cycle 4, model Kalen Ronda was asked to pose in a coffin for a 7 Deadly Sins shoot on the very day she found out a childhood friend had died in an accident. Watching her break down on set quite literally proved just how little space the show left for boundaries. or how little they cared for their people. House of Carter's, 2006. Nick and Aaron Carter's violent physical fight on camera. House of Carter's aired on E! In 2006 and sold itself as a raw look at the Carter siblings trying to live under the same roof and rebuild strained family ties. Instead of doing what it was meant to do, bring the family together, it ended up becoming a living proof of an entire family breaking apart on camera. The most infamous moment came in the show's second episode when a late-night argument over loud music spiraled into a full-blown fight between Nick and Aaron Carter. In the footage, Nick can be seen shoving his younger brother by the throat into another room before slamming a door. Aaron is naturally shaken and angry. He yells at Nick for not being a good person, while the rest of the family and the crew members try to separate the two. Despite that, the scene was still televised for millions of people to watch. Sure, one might argue that the physical aggression itself was enough to put this entry in the list. However, what made the scene disturbing was not just the physical aggression, but the fact that we literally saw an entire family being turned into a spectacle on camera. And by the looks of it, there was no way this entire thing was staged. Level 3. Squid Game's The Challenge 2023. Contestants suffering hypothermia during unsafe filming conditions. Squid Game The Challenge was filmed in 2023 after the show gained an absolutely insane amount of praise and traction. It was Netflix's attempt to turn one of its biggest dramas into a real-life competition. It pulled together 456 contestants to battle through recreations of the series' infamous games to win a record-breaking $4.56 million prize. While things were fine for the most part, certain instances in the challenge turned it into a perfect example of what the drama was actually criticizing. The opening challenge, Red Light Green Light, was filmed at Cardington Studios in Bedford, England. All of the contestants were dressed in the same thin green tracksuits worn in the drama. But the game reportedly stretched on for several hours in near freezing conditions. Players had been told that the challenge would only last about 2 hours. Instead, they were forced to endure long hours of the frost and had to be forced to give away their feet and hand warmers for the filmings. It was so bad that people began to collapse and medics began to rush in. What was meant to be the show's grand introduction quickly became chaotic and downright disturbing. In the weeks that followed, multiple contestants came out with their own allegations and bad experiences at the hands of the production team. They claimed they'd experienced hypothermia, nerve damage, and even saw someone's hands turn purple from frostbite. Executive producer of the show, Stephen Lambert, later said, "Everybody was warned that it was going to be cold, so we took all the necessary steps to prepare them for that. Yes, a few anonymous people were unhappy about the fact that they had been eliminated and it had been a cold, quite long experience, but it was no worse than many unscripted shows. When you're giving away a huge prize, it's always going to be clear to us it was going to be a tough show to take part in." But ultimately, we can't really tell what happened behind the scenes, no matter what that worm Lambert said. Kill Reality, 2005. Johnny Fairplay defecating on a bed during a cast prank. Kill Reality was a short-lived 2005 reality show on E! That brought together a handful of recognizable reality TV personalities and stuck them in a house while they filmed a horror movie called The Scorned. The series was meant to be part behind-the-scenes footage of the dramatics the cast were getting up to, but it quickly became known for one of the most infamous pranks in reality TV history that was neither funny nor creative. One of the most notorious cast members was a man by the name of Johnny Fairplay. He was already notorious from Survivor for his manipulative antics, but decided to up his game on Kill Reality. He pulled a prank on fellow housemate Trish Schneider from the real world, but his idea of a joke was to defecate on her bed. The act was as disgusting as it sounds, and the fallout was immediate. Cast members were completely horrified to the point that production had to step in. He was removed from the show, but not without getting a ton of criticism from fellow cast members. Ironically, the only reason the show isn't completely unknown is not because of its premise of a unique take on reality TV, but because of this particular incident. Armed and Famous, 2007, celebrities as police officers leading to real arrests. With so many generic and outright boring premises for reality shows, Armed and Famous came out as one that was, in theory, going to break the mold. Its concept was extremely surreal, even from the lens of reality television. It essentially blended in entertainment and civic duty, with the producers bringing in celebrities to receive reserve police officer training, followed by being thrown on actual patrol with police officers.
We're here to enforce the law, okay? This is as real as it gets. You guys are going to be police officers.
However, that changed very quickly when the line between spectacle and real law enforcement blurred. The show was essentially following police officers and these celebrities on their patrols and filming people getting arrested. All the victims later reported being pressured to sign release forms so their arrests could be aired. It was so bad that some of them, like Philip Vore, claimed they were held in jail until they agreed to sign. The mother of another victim came out claiming that they were offered t-shirts and minimal payments in exchange for permission. She said it was downright humiliating and exploitative. Then the case of Lindsay Clements drew further criticism. Clements was pulled over and arrested for driving under the influence while the show was filming. Her arrest was deliberately conducted with celebrities present and was broadcast on national television. She later filed a lawsuit arguing that the incident was mishandled and that her privacy was violated in the process. She understandably claimed that the broadcast left her feeling exploited at one of the lowest points in her life. Who Wants to Marry a Multi-Millionaire? 2000. Revelation of Rick Rockwell's restraining order for domestic violence. Who Wants to Marry a Multi-Millionaire was a single 2-hour, one-night reality special that aired on Fox in 2000. The premise of the episode was so absurd that it could only have been devised for shock value. It was essentially a beauty-styled pageant event where 50 women would compete to win the affections of a multi-millionaire, who, in this case, was Rick Rockwell, a real estate developer who also claimed to be a stand-up comedian. However, from the start, things weren't looking too good with Rick's identity. People were questioning his millionaire status despite the network claiming he had more than $2 million to his name. They also didn't believe his stand-up comedian claim, considering how none of the organizations he had worked acknowledged he was ever there. Also, really not that funny. Things ultimately boiled over when Rick's former fiancée came out with physical harm and threat allegations against him. She claimed that he'd stalked her after they had ended their engagement and threw her and hit her around. Apparently, Rick had not disclosed that to the production team, in addition to the fact that his ex-partner had gotten a restraining order against him. Around the same time, the woman who won the competition, Darva Conger, requested an annulment of their marriage, citing that she was not informed about his past. He was not honest and did not represent those restraining orders.
Darva, are you ready for a honeymoon tonight?
Absolutely, ready to go.
The annulment was later granted to her by the judge. The show was quite literally an ill-thought-out romantic spectacle. It also proved once again how money-hungry big productions were, so much so that they did not even bother performing an appropriate background check for the most important cast member of their show. Splash, 2013. Contestants suffering dangerous falls and injuries from high dives. Splash was a celebrity diving competition that was known for pairing famous public figures with a celebrity diver so they could learn complex forms of diving. The problem was, most of these people had little to no diving background, and they were basically pushed to perform tough diving stunts in front of a live audience. It was supposed to be a light entertainment thing, but the risks involved became extremely apparent very quickly. Early in the season, Mexican actor Chuy Bravo broke his heel during practice and had to leave the show. Rory Bushfield is a professional skier who ended up receiving the short end of the stick as well. He ruptured his eardrum during filming, but chose to keep on going despite medical concerns. He eventually won the season. The most notorious case was that of Nicole Eggert, an actress who attempted a multi-flip dive and struck the water flat on her back. While she was pulled out immediately and given medical care, there was significant bruising with potential damage to her kidneys. And although she ended up being completely fine, this particular dive of hers highlighted how absolutely brutal the show's format was. These people were not divers, yet they were placed in situations where the margin of error was so small, it would be life-threatening if anything went bad. That's sheer negligence. Level 4. Alone, 2015 to present. David Nessia's medical evacuation due to extreme starvation and hallucinations. Alone is a reality survival show that focuses more on the realism of survival rather than the fear factor and shock value associated with it. However, the show's premise in itself is so rigorous that everything somehow ends up becoming sensationalized without even trying. The show drops 10 survivalists into isolated landscapes with the sole task of surviving said wilderness through self-reliance and local resources. While they are placed in one singular location, the production team makes sure these people are far away from each other so they never interact. In other words, in addition to having to worry about surviving, Alone's contestants are also fully alone. And naturally, under that much physical and mental duress, there's bound to be an extreme case where one contestant collapses. That is exactly what happened in Season 3 when the show was set in Patagonia. Dave Nessia was one of the more promising contestants on the series and had reached the final 4. However, during the final few episodes, there was something about him that was very visibly wrong. Not only the production crew, but also the viewers could actually feel his health deteriorating. He started becoming immensely paranoid and began hoarding food despite having enough to eat. He lost half of his body weight and would be seen aimlessly wandering around. He even began to have hallucinations. After much deliberation, he was finally put under extensive medical supervision, which revealed that his blood pressure had dropped to fatal levels and he would not be able to continue. He almost collapsed while fishing and was too disoriented to function properly. It wasn't long before he was removed from the show despite his own protests. Outback Jack, 2004. Contestant Marissa Clark suffers severe heat stroke. Outback Jack was a strange reality show that aired in 2004 on TBS as a hybrid between survival and dating television. The premise consisted of 12 women from urban backgrounds being dropped into the remote Australian outback. Over there, they had to adapt to extreme conditions while also competing for the attention of Outback Jack, a 6-foot-tall underwear model, Vadim Dale. These women were not treated very well on the show. They were essentially airdropped into an unforgiving environment, and I mean that literally. They were actually forced to parachute out of their planes to get to their destination. The entire show was unforgiving. All 12 contestants were expected to endure long hikes, live in tents, and cope with the relentless heat, insects, and naturally, intense isolation. In addition to that, the women were pitted against each other in this strange hostile dynamic where they had to vie for Outback Jack's affection. The very first episode, however, was enough to expose to the producers how bad this idea was. During a particularly physically demanding trek in the intense heat, one of the contestants, called Melissa Clark, collapsed from heat stroke. She became disoriented and her body gave out under the strain. Production medics rushed in and provided her with IV fluids and immediate care before removing her from the set to go to a proper hospital. Clark later recalled that she genuinely believed her life was at risk at that moment. And although Clark recovered and eventually returned to the competition, the implications of her collapse were not lost on anyone. Outback Jack ran for only one season. The Hills, 2006 to 2010, Heidi Montag's 10 plastic surgeries in one day. The Hills was a classic MTV reality show that aired from 2006 to 2010. It followed a group of young adults navigating their lives, relationships, and career ambitions in Los Angeles. You could even compare it to a comedy drama series like in the City, except with real people. The show highlighted the aspirational lifestyle of its cast, wrapped in dramatic soap opera moments and glossy, exaggerated cinematography.
You know why I'm mad at you? Why, Lauren? You know why I'm mad at you. You know what you did. What did I do? You know what you did. What did I do?
For the most part, nothing about the show seemed particularly harmful. However, as we've also seen with modern social media trends, anything revolving around young people inevitably carries its own set of mental and physical risks. In November 2009, cast member Heidi Montag underwent 10 cosmetic surgeries in a single day, creating the biggest controversy the show had ever faced. She was only 23 years old at the time and went through everything from chin reduction and rhinoplasty to multiple body augmentations and liposuction. All the procedures were performed by Beverly Hills plastic surgeon Dr. Frank Ryan. At the time, Heidi admitted she was addicted to plastic surgery and had been unhappy with her looks for years.
I do want to look like
Why
Barbie.
would you want to look like Barbie?
Are you telling me you don't think I look good?
Maybe you should rephrase the question.
No. Do I look good?
Her grueling recovery and lasting scars made the experience even worse. She later revealed that part of her bone had been shaved off for a more snatched look, which left her unable to move her face for weeks. She was bedridden, required 24-hour care, and relied heavily on her husband, Spencer Pratt, who was told at one point that she might not survive the surgeries. Later reports even claimed that Heidi died for a minute during one of the procedures. For Heidi, the surgeries were initially meant to be empowering, turning her into what she thought would be the best version of herself, at least physically. But she later admitted she hit rock bottom after the procedures. Looking into the mirror only left her regretting ever altering her face and body. The ordeal shed light on a troubling issue that continues to grow in the age of social media: body image. The fact that she was willing to endure such pain and risk just to meet society's standards of beauty is not only heartbreaking, but also uncomfortably relevant today. Paula's Home Cooking, 2002 to 2012, Paula Deen's racial slurs and discrimination scandal. Paula's Home Cooking ran on the Food Network for a full decade and became the defining face of cooking shows. It was hosted by butter-obsessed chef Paula Deen, who had built the show's reputation on making homely Southern recipes with a down-to-earth presentation style that resonated with audiences all over the world. Deen herself had this aura of pleasantness to her that made her one of the most recognizable TV personalities in the world. Sadly, all of that came crashing down when a lawsuit against Deen became public knowledge. The case was brought forward by one of Deen's former restaurant managers, who claimed that she and other employees had been subjected to racial and gender discrimination in the workplace. She claimed that Deen had been hostile toward African Americans and had not talked about them in very favorable ways. This was further backed by Deen herself admitting to using racial slurs in the past, citing that a robbery was what made her say them because at the time she didn't feel real favorable towards him. The man she claimed was African American. Additionally, there was another extremely distressing incident where she was reported to muse about wanting to set a Southern plantation-style themed wedding for her brother. She allegedly intended to hire black servers who would be dressed in uniforms that resembled that dark age. But she eventually gave up on the idea because the media would be on her about that. The fallout was almost immediate. The Food Network instantly dropped her and didn't renew their contract. She lost major sponsorships, including Smithfield Foods, Walmart, and Target, and most of her cookbooks and branded cookware were removed from shelves. Later on, the court dismissed the allegation against her over the fact that the accuser herself was white. But the damage was so deeply embedded that there was no way Paula Deen was going to make a comeback, no matter how much she buttered up some executives. Level 5. The Chop, Britain's Top Woodworker, 2020. Contestant Darren Lumsden's far-right tattoos. They let anyone on these shows is a statement that's hard to deny after learning about the case of The Chop's embarrassingly horrible background check on one of its contestants. The Chop was basically a woodwork rendition of the Great British Bake Off, but instead of cooking, contestants would come on the show to showcase their carpentry and woodwork skills. It pitted highly skilled professionals against each other in a series of carving and wood chopping challenges to furnish a cabin in the woods. To be fair to the show, this was a very unique concept in a sea of extremely generic reality shows. It had a lot of potential to succeed and was only scrapped because of the production team's own fault. During one of the promotional trailers of the show, a man by the name of Darren Lumsden was showcased to be one of the frontrunners. He was a fan favorite and was already gaining a lot of notoriety for his insane number of tattoos. Even the show portrayed him as a controversial man with a lot of opinions, with the director going as far as stating, "He's quite a character. We met him again at a photo shoot recently, and he'd had more tattoos etched on top of his other tattoos, which I thought showed an incredible level of commitment to the cause." But what they didn't initially realize was that Lumsden's controversial opinions were not casual ones along the lines of "a hot dog is a sandwich," but were actually demeaning and harmful ones that have grave implications. This was caught early on by fans when they noticed certain tattoos on his body. He had the number 88 inked on his face, which was basically an endorsement of Adolf Hitler. He also had the fraction 23/16 on his body, which essentially translates to white power, and he had a SIG rune near his nose. All three tattoos signaled toward a much more sinister mindset than what was initially marketed. The network responsible for the show, Sky History, initially defended the symbols, stating they were personal memoirs for Lumsden, referring to his memories of his late father. However, further investigation revealed that Lumsden's father was alive and well and had not been in contact with his son for years. And this is where things started to go downhill. People started to look into Lumsden and found him to be highly questionable. Sky History decided to cancel the series outright because the damage was way worse than a small investigation could cover. They ultimately reiterated their stance against racism and hate speech. The Jump, 2014 to 2017, Beth Tweddle's severe neck injury. The Jump was a winter sports-themed reality competition that was broadcast on Channel 4 between 2014 and 2017. The format of the show was simply to pit different celebrities against each other as they one-upped each other in different winter sports. The sports that were featured on the show ranged from ski jumping and skeleton to ice speed skating and bobsledding, all very physically demanding challenges. During the third season of the series, Olympic gymnast Beth Tweddle, who had been participating in the show, suffered from a severe injury during training. She had been training for her ski jump when she crashed into a barrier after a bad landing, fracturing her vertebrae in the neck. She had to be airlifted to the nearest hospital. Tweddle's injury was considerably more serious than expected. She had to be given surgery instantly where they fused her damaged bones together using a graft from her hip. And sure, the surgery was successful and she was on her way to recovery, but no one can change the fact that to an athlete as successful and talented as her, an injury like that is extremely detrimental. Tweddle later came out to say that the accident took a massive toll on her mental health and pushed her to seek both physical and psychological therapy. The worst part is, Tweddle was just one of the 7 contestants that were injured on the show. Just a few days earlier, Rebecca Adlington, an Olympic swimmer, had to leave the show because of a dislocated shoulder. Another case was of Tina Hobley, who was forced to withdraw after breaking her arm in 2 places. This was clearly not a one-time thing and was very understandably not the contestants' fault. Channel 4 initially tried to deflect their responsibility by citing their resources and experts on site, but after multiple reports, they were forced to launch an immediate investigation. Ultimately, it was renewed for only 1 more season and was effectively canceled afterwards. It should be noted that the show was rejected by another network before for being too dangerous, but was adapted by Channel 4. Its optimistic framing of extreme sports could not mask the actual dangers behind the scenes. Buck Wild, 2013. Star Shane Gandy's tragic death leading to show cancellation. Buck Wild was a 2013 MTV show that starred and was targeted toward young adults. The show's entire premise was basically to be cast into a rural area in order to embrace small-town antics and have fun. It was even called Redneck Jersey Shore at one point.
See poor Sarah.
Seriously? That's the sweetest thing anybody's ever done for me.
All for you.
However, despite its seemingly harmless premise, the show drew a lot of negative attention and was already highly controversial for its problematic cast members who had been arrested multiple times. But what made it go from bad to worse was not an arrest, it was the unexpected death of one of the most popular stars, Shane Gandy. Gandy was found dead alongside his uncle and friend in their old Ford Bronco just a month after the release of Buck Wild's first season. He had been reportedly missing 30 hours before he was finally found unresponsive on a remote road in Sissonville. It was revealed that the vehicle had become lodged in deep mud and began accumulating carbon monoxide. The tailpipe had become submerged in the mud hole, allowing the toxic exhaust to fill the cabin inside. The domino effect afterwards was absolutely insane. MTV instantly released a statement offering condolences to the families of the deceased and also ensured that they were trying to stay in contact with them for more information. Ultimately, Shane Gandy's loss proved too much for the production company to keep going with the second season, which was already scheduled to be released later that year. They stated that it just wasn't appropriate for them to continue on with the show without Shane's magnetic personality. My 600-Pound Life, 2012. Contestant deaths and surgical complications post-show. For those who are still unfamiliar with the highly controversial TLC show, My 600-Pound Life follows individuals living with extreme obesity as they try to lose weight in an attempt to turn their lives around. These transformations are life-altering and are done under the guidance of a large medical team. However, despite this seemingly medically oriented premise of the show, it is ultimately a reality show that thrives off of extreme shock value content. It documents its subjects going through strict diets, intense mental struggles, and weight loss surgeries designed to reduce health risks. While this may superficially sound like a positive experience, the darker undertones of the show significantly change the atmosphere of the show. One of the biggest controversies it faced is the immense number of deaths among its participants. Since its debut, the show has had over a dozen former cast members die because of obesity-related or surgery-related complications. And it's these very incidents that showcase how extreme such an intense transformation can be on the human body, even under strict medical supervision. One of the most widely talked about cases is that of Kalisa McMillan, who appeared in season 8 of the show. She had undergone bariatric surgery but ended up suffering from complications that led to her death. She was only 41 at the time. Previously, she'd faced all sorts of health troubles throughout her life, including suffering from a heart attack at 39 and being on life support just a few months prior to her death. TLC offered their condolences to her grieving family, but the implications of her death remained. Her episode has been removed from all platforms since then. The thing is, this was not a one-time thing. Kelly Mason, featured in season 7, died in 2019 during the filming of her episode. She had suffered from heart failure while the show was airing. There was Sean Milliken from season 4, who tragically died after he had almost succeeded with his weight loss journey. It was reported that he had developed fatal complications from an infection. James King, a season 5 participant, died of organ failure related to long-term obesity at the age of 49. Another very tragic story was of Destiny Lachey, the first trans star to have appeared on the show.
I think I have a lot of emotional eating problems. I've been through a lot being transgender and gay.
She was making significant progress and had been one of the more successful people on the show. However, she was suffering from depression and lost her life in February of 2022. These are just the high-profile cases from the show that got some media attention. There are several more people who have lost their lives. And sure, it's safe to admit that each case varies in detail, but together they underscore how dangerous both obesity and the surgical solutions offered on the show can be. Level 6. Susanoo Denpa Shonen, 1998 to 2002. Nasabi's year-long naked isolation and humiliation. The Truman Show, as haunting as it is ultimately a fictional movie that dives deep into the psychological impacts of entertainment ambitions and, well, money. However, as disturbing and absurd as it sounds, there was an actual event in Japan that was eerily similar to the movie. Susanoo Denpa Shonen was a Japanese reality show known for its borderline sadistic premise. Borderline my ass. It revolved around throwing its contestants into some of the most inhumane challenges with the promise of a small monetary gift and media fame. Those who were victimized by the show were usually small, obscure comedians who were willing to do anything to get some attention. Nasubi, or Tomoaki Hamatsu, was one such contestant who appeared on the show's segment Life of Prizes in 1998. He was an aspiring comedian who was essentially tricked into auditioning for the show under the pretense of winning gifts worth $8,000. When he did pass his audition, he was blindfolded and escorted into a small, bare apartment where he was challenged to survive with minimal resources. He was stripped naked and left with nothing more than a pen, postcards, telephone, and a couple of magazines. His task was to survive solely by entering mail-in sweepstakes and winning the prize mentioned before. To some of us, this might not sound that extreme, but you should know that Hamatsu was completely cut off from the outside world and had no food, clothes, or water. He would survive for 15 months in that solitary confinement solely from the stuff he got from the mail-in sweepstakes. Unknown to him, Hamatsu was being broadcast live to the entire country while he struggled to even keep himself alive. Viewers nationwide could see him continuously naked and starving and could witness his mental deterioration in real time. For the first few days, he only survived on cheap crackers given to him by the production team. Later on, certain prizes started trickling in that made him more keen on going forward. He first won a bag of rice that he could not cook and was forced to consume raw. Then his diet saw a little variety with canned and kibbled dog food and sugary drinks. That was his primary source of nutrition. His isolation became so bad that he turned a stuffed toy into a sensei-like figure and would spend hours talking to it. He eventually began winning games and TV sets that would help a little in his isolation, but the show's producers were bent on making his life as tough as possible. When he reached his goal of winning $8,000 sweepstakes, he was shifted to another location and forced to start the challenge all over. This happened multiple times until it was finally revealed to him that he'd been an object of people's amusement for the past 15 months. This little experiment was quite literally reality television stripped to its rawest form of cruelty. Years later, Hamatsu still grappled with the after effects of the literal torment he faced during his appearance on the show. It is reported that he could not wear clothes and could not carry on conversations for 6 entire months after coming out of isolation. Koh-Lanta, 2001. Contestant Gérard Babin's fatal heart attack during a challenge. Koh-Lanta is a French reality show based on the format of the show Survivor. It basically revolves around the contestants being sent into the wilderness and, you guessed it, forced to survive on limited resources. The contestants are then systematically voted out through a tribal voting system by each other. The show went through a fairly dark controversy when one of its participants, 25-year-old contestant Gérard Babin, died on set during a challenge. The domino effect his death caused is still remembered to this day. In March 2013, during the filming of the show's 16th season, there was a tug-of-war challenge. Babin was participating in it but ended up collapsing during. He reported muscle cramps and lightheadedness and was given immediate medical care by the show's on-set medic, Dr. Thierry Costa. According to him, Babin stabilized after being given first aid and was evacuated by helicopter. However, during his transfer, he suffered multiple cardiac arrests and was pronounced dead when the heli landed. Later on, it was revealed that he had already been suffering from a pre-existing heart condition. The investigation deemed the death as being due to natural causes. As a result, the show was canceled for that season and the contestants were sent back home. Sadly, it gets even more disturbing. The doctor responsible for giving Babin emergency care very unexpectedly took his own life just a few days after Babin's death. He was found dead in his hotel room with a note that said, In the past few days, my name has been tarnished in the media. I am certain that I treated Gerald in a respectable manner as a patient and not as a contestant. Level 7. Dropped 2015. Fatal helicopter crash killing 3 celebrities during filming. Dropped was a French survival reality show that placed athletes and celebrities in remote and dangerous environments to showcase their survival skills. It was quite an ordinary show with a pretty generic concept shared with many other adventure-based reality shows. Contestants would rely on limited resources while being filmed in extreme settings. However, what was supposed to be ordinary reality TV fun turned grim when a devastating accident happened during filming. On March 9, 2015, during filming in La Roja, Argentina, 2 helicopters carrying the cast and crew collided with each other mid-air. Both the aircrafts hurled toward the ground, killing all 10 people on board. The deceased consisted of some of the more prominent French Olympic athletes and sports people, including swimmer Camille Muffat, boxer Alexis Van and yachtswoman Florence Artaud. The others who lost their lives were 5 members of the production crew and 2 pilots. Later on, the investigation revealed multiple instances of negligence from the production staff that were later cited as evidence in court. Pilot error was initially cited as the cause of the devastating accident, but a single liable reason was not determined. However, the family of one of the cameramen who died on the scene, Laurent Spoznik, sued the production company for his death. The court later ruled that Spoznik was filming in highly unfavorable conditions that he was not trained for, which ultimately didn't shine a very positive light on the whole show. The company had previously been criticized for lapses in safety and labor standards in its shows. While it had immediately denied any responsibility in the helicopter crash, they were condemned in the case for inexcusable fault. This just goes to show, yet again, how these entertainment companies and networks do not particularly care for much as long as they're getting their content. Dropped was meant to highlight endurance and resilience, but in a controlled environment. It was quickly turned into something that would haunt the lives of everyone involved forever. If you found this video disturbingly intriguing, check out our video on photos with disturbing backstories Iceberg.